Hey everybody, this video is a bit of a departure from what I normally do, which is mostly just diet-based, nutrition-based content. But I thought this was important to talk about because it is a big problem. And, you might say, oh, well, you support farmers. Well, not really. Not all of them. Um, this is and not that I support Trump either. What he's doing here. It's not good. I'm going to explain why. So, there was recently announced an aid package as part of the big bill, the big beautiful bill, and it gives $12 billion, which is already farmers. These farmers, they get a ton of money all the time. They're heavily subsidized, and it's just more of the same. So, um, let's see here. $12 billion, 11 billion is used for this stuff: barley, chickpeas, corn, cotton, lentils, oats, peanuts, peas, rice, sorghum, soybeans, wheat, canola, cram, flax, mustard, rapeseed, safflower, sesame, sunflower. Okay, so you get the idea. So a lot of these crops are instrumental in propping up big agriculture. The big ag companies that line the grocery store shelves with processed junk and poison. Okay, this is indirectly a bailout to that industry because without these farmers, they wouldn't have the means to make that crap. So you can see they're really blaming the trade war for this. That China is using the soybean farmers as a bargaining chip with the Trump administration because of the tariffs. And while that may be the case partly, there's also another tangential factor in play, which I'm not going to talk about any more than this in the video, but that's the grand solar minimum, changing climate patterns. It's getting colder. Food's going to become more scarce. Check out Adapt 2030 or the Oppenheimer Ranch Project on YouTube for more information about that. But the perspective and the guise of this is really that, oh, it's just the tariffs and stuff. It's not just the tariff, guys. Not to mention the compounding problem of more farms close every year than are being started. So that's another can of worms. But so we have all these farmers, these big corporate ag farmers, monocroppers, who are ravishing the land to make money to sell soybeans and corn to China and stuff, and then to big ag, which poison us. So, these are not people that I believe we should prop up or have sympathy for. They are just as bad, in a sense, maybe even worse than the people who work for Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. If you're going to take that stance, a bit of a that's the best comparison I could think of. It's not really the best comparison, but I think you know what I mean. These people there, you think, oh well, I'm just a humble farmer, and I get out there on my tractor and I feed the world, and it's like, well, dude, like you're you're raping the land and you're poisoning people. You're poisoning the land, you're poisoning the food, and then you're selling that food to companies that poison people, that poison the lemmings, because they just buy what the TV tells them to. That's what's going on there. And yeah, you get rich off of that. Okay, so what? And you get rich off of that because you get bailouts like this when you're in trouble because you're Trump's base. Not that the Democrats wouldn't do this. They most certainly would because, again, it's those corporations that prop up those people and prop up the politicians. So that's also going on as well. And here they're blaming Biden, not necessarily irrelevant, but oh, and another thing too, which is it in this article? Yeah, I'll link these articles so you can look through them. Here we go. My favorite labor costs, guys. So not only do we give a bunch of money to corporations to bail them out, but we also subsidize labor as another form of taxpayer subsidies. Indirect taxpayer subsidies of industries is cheap labor. Doesn't matter what it is, white collar, blue collar, legal, illegal, all that stuff just lowers wages for people because they're like, well, why do I have to pay an American, a fair wage when I can pay someone, half of what they make, and I offload getting them into the country with visas. So, again, that's the visa program. It costs the government money, and that's money and time the government spend to undercut American wages and labor. Okay, so instead of paying somebody whatever it would take them to get out to a farm to pick the crops, they're gonna offload. They're gonna offload it to cheap labor. They're gonna say, oh well, golly, no one wants to work for $10 an hour all day in the sun. It's like, well, yeah, you can't really live off of that, bud. You got to pay people whatever it's going to cost, whatever is going to incentivize the labor market to come and work for you. There's no such thing as a job no one wants to do, right? There's no such thing as a job no one wants to do. It's a matter of the pay. If you pay somebody enough, that job will get done. If you don't want to pay somebody enough, or your business model does not incorporate a wage that incentivizes people to work for you, unless the government can come and give you billions of dollars or import massive amounts of cheap labor, then maybe your business doesn't deserve to survive. Just saying. Okay, so yeah, lots of issues here with this. As you can see here, you can just go through and it's just here we go. This is all the this section here is all about the loan assistance programs and the bailouts for sugar and soybeans. It's not just one thing. It's all these things. Over $30 billion in ad hoc assistance delivered to farmers since January. So that's $30 billion this year, and then they want to do another $12 billion that gets pushed into February, I think is when they're going to release this. So that's crazy, and that's not going to be the end of it, right? There's going to be even more assistance next year. Assistance. So let's look here too, okay? Because this is pretty interesting. This has some pretty interesting, because that was the USDA press release. So let's look at the losses. $15 billion in corn, $6.7 billion in soybean losses, $5.9 billion in wheat, $3.4 billion in sorghum and rice farmers for $1 billion. Cotton's $3.4 billion, sorghum and rice is over $1 billion. So look at this. This is really interesting. This is really telling. So the entire industry of crop revenue for the past 4 years, okay, input costs have been above crop revenue for the past 4 years. So for 4 years, all the input costs have exceeded what the revenue actually is. So revenue is $144 billion projected, while the costs of production are $179 billion. That's crazy. $35 billion. And the government's making that up, aren't they? Didn't we just read in that other article? Yeah, over $30 billion in assistance delivered to farmers. $35 billion deficit this year, projection. There you go. The bridge payments will help, but crop producers will still see negative returns, right? And this, like I said, this is just the corporations telling the politicians to write bailouts for the farmers so they have food to sell to the lemmings. That's what it is. And you can read about this guy, Besant. Interestingly enough, he divested this week as part of his ethics agreement, so I'm out of that business. Notice how he left the business because it's failing, right? Described himself as a soybean farmer. This guy's not a good guy. Soybean farmers, they don't have the best interests in the community, in the land, the steward of the land. Because what are you selling? You're growing soybeans with poison and chemicals, right? So food companies can turn that into food that also has poison and chemicals to feed to people or livestock. It's just insane. And then it's like, well, golly, I'm just a humble soybean farmer, and I voted for Trump, and it's like, dude, just check yourself. Maybe maybe do something with the land that isn't destructive. There's a huge market out there for all sorts of things. And then, the labor thing, like I talked, it's a whole can of worms. Basically, this things cannot keep going this way. It's I don't know how much longer they will, but it seems the world will just churn on. 12.5 million metric tons this year exports to China. 25 million metric tons for the next 3 years for soybeans, sorghum, and lumber. Okay, so what? I mean, you want to make soybeans to sell to China, okay, but like, who cares? How about we just feed the country? Did I say this already? More farms are closing every year than farms are being started. So farmers have a high suicide rate. Um, of course, if you're a soybean farmer and you're not even making ends meet, and all you're getting out of that is destroying your land, being exposed to a bunch of chemicals, and then poisoning people who get the soybeans through processed foods, you'd have to take a look at your life and be like, what am I doing with my life? Of course, probably going crazy from the pesticide exposure is a likely issue. I don't know if you've ever been around a farm that has been spraying, but it's ridiculous. I was driving into work, and right next to a field that was being sprayed, I was perplexed at why the air smelled like gasoline. The air smelled like gasoline, and I couldn't figure out why. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, and I see this tractor spraying all the soybean fields. I'm like, oh, there we go. The guy wasn't even wearing any mat. He wasn't even wearing anything. So it's like, what do you expect? Of course, you go crazy and take your life because you're drinking chemicals for half the year. It's ridiculous. So anyway, that's what's going on here. That's why it's a bad idea. They should not be subsidizing this industry. They should just cut it off, and you know, um, pivot. Or at least if they're going to pay the farmers, pay them to pivot to something else. Pay them to pivot to something else that isn't going to poison people. So we don't have food scarcity riots because people can't buy their hot Cheetos and their Chick-fil-A and their McDonald's, because that's really what would happen if this industry collapsed. Is all the fast food and processed food people rely on, it would evaporate within 6 months. It'd be gone. It'd be gone. Um, so yeah, um, support local farmers. That's the best thing you can do. Um, I'm not trying to black pill with the farmer statistic, but yeah, like, farms are going out of business and new farms are not replacing them. So, if you in the future, if you're going to want your own foods, you're going to have to start making them yourself, especially with the changing climate conditions. North of 45 degrees latitude is not looking good for having year round, not even year round, but seasonal food production. So, just some food for thought. I know this is a bit of a detraction from my usual fare videos, but I hope you found it interesting. I used to kind of be a political junkie, so there's, it's that's basically what's going on. Is Trump's appeasing his base, but really what he's doing is just doing what the big ag corporations tell him to do. so they can keep producing garbage to sell to the Chinese and big ag to poison us, and so they don't lose money. All the businesses and companies in the Walmarts and the supermarkets of America, and the fast food as well. So that's really what's going on here with the bailouts. It's disguised as something that will help his base, and even then, a lot of these people that are going to get the bailouts are going to be the wealthier farms. It's not going to be the family-run farms and the farms that actually try to do the right thing. Even if they are doing the soybeans and the corn, they're not going to get nearly what they should. So this is it's just bad all across the board.